Good evening. I'm David Kramer with Alaska Weather. As always, please visit our website, weather.gov/Alaska, get updates to the forecast, or check out any watches, warnings, or advisories that we have out for your area. Also, call our weather info line at 1-855-937-4977, getting updates to the forecast. That means as well. Starting off, we have quite a few advisories and one watch out for the state. The watch is a winter storm watch for the Klondike Highway area. Expecting to see some heavy snow there. 6 to 10 inches are expected from Tuesday night into Wednesday afternoon. That's going to be for areas above 1,500 feet. As we move out over mainland Alaska, we do have quite a few advisories. We'll start off in the east for the central and eastern interior. Winter weather advisories for snow. Going to see snow amounts from 4 to 7 inches throughout those areas, and then that's going to be in effect until Tuesday around noon. Some heavier snow amounts for the southern portions of the Alaska Range and the Susitna Valley. We do have these out into around 3 p.m. on Tuesday. These are also winter weather advisories for snow, and we could see up to 20 inches of snow for the Susitna Valley during that time frame. Finally, along the west coast, we have several wind chill advisories currently in effect. We do expect those to transition over to winter weather advisories for wind chill and blowing snow as we move into the nighttime hours, but these are going to be out until tomorrow night, so Tuesday night, all along the west coast. Wind chills could be as cold as below 55 degrees Fahrenheit, and we will still see some blowing snow developing overnight tonight and lasting through tomorrow as well. We also had our blizzard warning that was in effect for the Kuskokwim Delta area. That is now a winter weather advisory for blowing snow, improving those visibilities. However, they are still pretty low, getting down to about a half mile or less at times, and that is going to be in effect until Tuesday morning. Taking a look at some of the cause of this, we'll start with our satellite imagery, where we do have a band of clouds that you can see out over the central portions of the interior, northeastern portions of the state, down through the Susitna Valley as well. That's dumping snow on those locations. And we'll watch this again, and you can see it kind of just sitting here in place, bringing those heavier snow amounts to the area. Then we can see some drier conditions along the west coast of the state as we look at our weather for the remainder of today. We have high pressure up to the north, a low pressure down to the south. It's bringing a tighter pressure gradient, bringing in some stronger winds to the west coast, bringing in those wind chills, and we will start to see some snow picking up with that, bringing in some blowing snow conditions to the west coast as we move later into this evening. But for now, we have our stationary boundary stretching from the northeastern portion of the state down through south central Alaska. That's what's bringing a lot of the snow to the areas along the Arctic coastline, interior, down through south central. We have southerly winds coming up over the Gulf of Alaska, bringing some warmer air to the area, which is going to give us some rain along the North Gulf Coast and into the Panhandle, primarily low-lying areas for that rain as we get into higher elevations and more interior locations, expecting that to be snow. Finally, out west, we have a complex area of low pressure out by the eastern Aleutian Islands, and that is going to bring some snow to the Pribilof Islands and out through much of the rest of the western Bering Sea, but a mix of rain and snow for the central Aleutians through the Alaska Peninsula. As we look into tonight, we're going to see more of a consolidated low by the eastern Aleutians, snow out in the Bering Sea, mix of rain and snow for much of the Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. Pretty similar look to mainland Alaska, snow extending down from the northeastern portions of the state through the interior south, central Alaska, and through the southwestern portions of the state. And then along the west coast, stronger winds continuing to bring wind chills and blowing snow conditions to the west coast. Southerly winds out over the Gulf, bringing some rain to low-lying areas of the Gulf Coast down into the Panhandle, with snow once again at higher elevations and more interior locations. Moving into Tuesday, another system coming up to reinforce the southerly push of warm air center and moisture coming into the Gulf of Alaska. Some rain out in the Panhandle area, transitioning over to snow as we get farther to the north. And as we move into the Tuesday night time frame, remember that we do have some heavier snow expected for the Klondike Highway. Then out over mainland Alaska, still snow throughout much of the southern portions through the interior and eastern portions of the Arctic coastline. And then still areas a little bit drier, but with some blowing snow and wind chills along the west coast. Finally, out over the Bering Sea, we do have quite a bit of snowfall here with our low out by the eastern Aleutian Islands, bringing a mix of rain and snow through much of the Aleutians and into the Alaska Peninsula. Finally, on Wednesday, a new system coming in from the west, bringing a mix of rain and snow to the western Aleutian Islands, but quite a bit of snow out ahead of that for the Bering Sea. Stronger winds there as well. Out over mainland Alaska, low pressure is going to finally spread out into the state, bringing snow throughout much of mainland Alaska along the Arctic coastline, interior, southwest, south central Alaska. We are going to have some push of southwesterly winds, bringing in some warmer air to the Panhandle, where we do expect to see some rain at southern locations and snow farther to the north. Moving into our temperatures, starting Tuesday morning, low temps dropping into the upper 30s to near 40, warmer farther to the south. And then for south central Alaska, dropping down to around 30 degrees, colder as we get to more interior locations. Copper River Basin down to 16 degrees. Highs for Tuesday afternoon getting up into the 30s for interior locations to near 40 by the water. Down in southeast Alaska to around 40 degrees up north into the mid 40s down south. Wednesday morning lows dropping down into the upper 30s to lower 40s, warmest again in the southern locations. And then for south central Alaska, dropping down Wednesday morning into the 30s throughout much of the area. Once again, a little bit colder there in Copper River Basin. However, warmer Wednesday morning than it was on Tuesday morning. Wednesday afternoon highs getting up into the mid 30s to right around 40 degrees for south central, and then in the lower to mid 40s for the Panhandle area, warmer farther to the south. Moving up into the interior, we are expecting to see the warmest areas down in southeast, only single digits below zero there, but minus teens for much of the west coast, Arctic coastline, much of the interior getting a little bit colder there at Galena. Tuesday afternoon highs getting well above zero down in southeastern portions of the interior. Everywhere else is going to stay below zero. We're going to see minus teens along the Arctic coastline, down the west coast, with some minus single digits in some of the other areas around the interior. Wednesday morning lows going to stay in the minus teens along the Arctic coastline, down the west coast, and then staying above zero for areas in the southeastern portions of the interior. Then Wednesday afternoon highs getting back up into the 20s for those southeastern locations, staying above zero for places in the western interior, northern interior, and even some areas nearest to the west coast. Up along the Arctic coastline, however, going to stay below zero for those locations for those afternoon highs. Down in southwest Alaska on Tuesday morning, going to drop down below zero for the YK Delta area, but staying above zero to around 20 degrees for the Bristol Bay area. In the 30s for much of the Aleutian Islands and Alaska Peninsula, and then out by the western Aleutians, dropping down to around 32 degrees. Staying about the same for the western Aleutians on Tuesday afternoon, and then getting up to near 40 for the Aleutian Islands into the Alaska Peninsula, in the 20s to 30s for Bristol Bay area, and staying below zero for the YK Delta. Wednesday morning lows going to stay below zero, YK Delta, stay pretty similar for Bristol Bay as well, around 20 degrees into those mid 20s, down to around 30 degrees for the Aleutian Islands and Alaska Peninsula. And then as we get into Wednesday afternoon, staying just below zero for the YK Delta area and into the mid 30s for the Aleutian Islands and Southwest.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
We'll start off with a look at our flying weather. Out over the southeast Alaska area, widespread IFR conditions. Those are going to move up the North Gulf Coast as well, spreading throughout much of the southern portion of mainland Alaska, and then up through the central and eastern interior through the Yukon Flats area, and then up into the North Slope as well, especially in those eastern locations. We'll see a lot of that IFR. Down the west coast, we'll start to see some VFR down through the Yukon Delta, and then as we get by the Bristol Bay area, you're going to see some IFR conditions conditions there. Those IFR conditions are going to be spread throughout much of the central and southern Bering Sea, as well as the central and eastern Aleutian Islands. As we look into Tuesday afternoon, those conditions are going to push off more towards the east, bringing in IFR conditions from the Pribilof Islands down to the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, and out over Bristol Bay. Farther to the west, we're going to start to see things clear up in VFR conditions for the central Aleutian Islands and VFR by the western Aleutians. Out over mainland Alaska, seeing those IFR conditions once again extend up into near the central interior and then up into the eastern portions of the Brooks Range as well as along the north slope. Then down in south central Alaska, widespread MVFR conditions for inland locations in Cook Inlet, and then as we get out by the Gulf of Alaska, seeing widespread IFR conditions all the way from Kodiak Island through the Gulf and throughout southeast as well. As we move into Wednesday morning, continuing to see those widespread IFR conditions down through southeast Alaska, through much of the Gulf, all of south central Alaska and Kodiak Island, southwest Alaska as well, until we get into some of the places around Norton Sound, and then through the western interior up through the Brooks Range and some of the areas up along the north slope. However, as we get closer towards the water, conditions are expected to be a little bit more clear on Wednesday morning. Throughout the Bering Sea and Aleutians, going to see primarily MVFR conditions, but there are still some lingering areas of IFR that do extend over the Pribilof Islands area. As we move into Wednesday afternoon, the next system coming in is going to drop conditions down to IFR throughout the western Aleutian Islands, with MVFR extending through much of the Bering Sea and the remainder of the Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. As we move out over mainland Alaska, still seeing some areas of IFR down by Bristol Bay, extending up into the interior, some areas along the Brooks Range as well, and once again clearing up as we get near the Arctic Ocean, with some conditions such as AKwx seeing VFR conditions Wednesday afternoon. For south central Alaska, still seeing some IFR, especially around Prince William Sound area, with primarily MVFR inland locations. Susitna Valley, however, seeing some IFR conditions. And then down in the Panhandle area, we are expecting to see IFR conditions widespread. As we look through the passes, starting up north, AKwx is going to be MVFR, dropping down to IFR in the afternoon. However, north of the Brooks Range, expecting to see IFR throughout the day. That's going to be true at Adigan Pass, starting off MVFR, dropping down to IFR. Lake Clark and Merrill both expected to be IFR throughout the day on Wednesday. Rainy will start off IFR and then drop down to MVFR, or improve to MVFR conditions. Windy Pass will also start off IFR and improve to MVFR conditions in the afternoon, as well as at Isabel Pass. Mentasta, however, should be VFR throughout the day Tuesday. Tanita starting off IFR, improving to MVFR, and then Portage should be IFR throughout the day. Chilkoot and White also expected to be IFR throughout the day on Tuesday. Taking a look at our freezing level, surface freezing line is just the northern portions of the Panhandle area. Some warmer air coming up from the south here, approaching the southern portions of southeast Alaska. The freezing level going to move through south central Alaska and then out through the Bering Sea. As we look at our icing for Tuesday, are expecting to see icing between 2,000 and 10,000 feet for the Aleutian Islands, below 8,000 feet for southwest Alaska, between 1,000 and 7,000 for areas around south central, and 3,000 to 10,000 as we get closer towards the interior and Yukon Flats area. Down in southeast, between 4,000 and 7,000 feet is expected. For our jet stream, strongest portion of the jet is going to be moving into the southeastern portions of the mainland at about 120 knots out of a southwesterly direction. And then we do have another branch of the jet out by the western Aleutian Islands northwest direction, 115 knots. As you look at our 9,000-foot winds, we're going to see stronger winds out over the northwest coast, out of the east up to as high as 60 knots expected there, and then winds throughout the mainland, primarily a southwesterly direction up to as high as 55 knots, highest in the Copper River Basin, and then stronger winds getting near 50 knots as we get by the southeastern portions of the state. Down to 3,000 feet, clearing up quite a bit for southeast Alaska and much of the mainland as well. However, still going to see quite a bit of stronger winds up along the northwest coastline, easterly flow up to as high as 70 knots expected there. Taking a look at our turbulence expected all along the west coast of the state, from surface to 4,000 feet, surface to 6,000 for areas around Prince William Sound and south central, and then below 4,000 for the Yukon Flats.
Cadets, and welcome to the Okeanos Explorer. I'm Debbie, and I'm an ocean explorer. I work for NOAA, which stands for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Together with many other people, I work on this ship, and we explore the deep sea. How do we do that? Let's go find out.
Octonauts, let's do this. Yow!
The pressure in the ocean is so great humans can't go there, so we send a special robot. Octocadets, meet Deep Discoverer, our special robot for ocean exploration. And this is Chris. He works with Deep Discoverer. Hi, Chris.
Hey, Debbie.
Can you tell us about what Deep Discoverer does?
Sure. So this is Deep Discoverer, and today we're going to take Deep Discoverer up to 4 miles down to the ocean floor so you can see what Deep Discoverer sees.
Now, how do we do that?
We do that by using these powerful cameras and powerful lights.
That's neat. And what is that?
And this is our manipulator arm, and we use this arm to take biological and geological samples that we store up front in these boxes, and so that we can bring them to the surface so scientists can analyze them.
Wow, isn't that cool, Octocadets? Wow! Now that we know more about the special robot that explores the seafloor, let's find out more about the ship. Octocadets, let's do this. Now let's find out what we do with D2's video. Come along. This is the control room. A lot of things about D2 happen in here. Behind me you see the pilots. They steer D2 on the sea floor. And over here we have scientists. Hi, Steve and Stacy.
Hi, this is Steve and I'm Stacy and we are marine biologists.
Can you tell us about the work you do here?
We actually look at the videos collected by the robots and we try to identify organisms along with other scientists on the shore.
What are you looking at right now?
We're actually looking at a sea star.
That's so awesome, thank you. Now let's look at how we make maps of the seafloor.
Excellent, Quasi. A good map helps you to get to places you've never been.
We also have a scientist on board who makes maps of the seafloor. Hi, Derek.
Hi, Debbie.
Can you tell us about your work?
Sure. My job on the ship is to make maps of the ocean floor. We do this by sending sound from the bottom of the ship. It echoes off the seafloor and comes back to the ship. And then from that, we can make maps like this. So this is what it would look like if you were able to drain the water out of the ocean and actually see what the landscape looked like down there. We use these maps to give the vehicles a place to dive, and they explore further, just like Octonauts do.
Status report, Dashi.
We're right on course, Captain.
So earlier we learned that D2 picks things up from the seafloor with his manipulator arm. Let's find out what we do with those samples. This is the wet lab, and Megan spends a lot of time here. Megan, can you tell us about your work?
I am the sample data manager, so when the ROV comes up, we go out and we collect the samples from the ROV and we bring them in here. And we try to record as much information about them as possible, everything from the details about what they look like to the environment conditions where they were found. How cold was it, for example? Then we come in and we take imagery using this microscope, and we take pictures using this camera as well. And then after we get all the pictures taken and we're ready, we prepare them for shipping to other scientists and museums so more science can be done, such as the squat lobster, this cup coral as well.
And what is that?
This is a piece of coral, or several pieces of coral, that we think might actually be a new species. So we are going to send it out for a comparison to existing species to see if we discovered something new.
Wow, you have a really cool job.
Thank you.
Fascinating. I've read about this, but I've never actually seen it.
An important part of how we explore the ocean is keeping in touch with scientists and Octocadets on shore. Let's go see how we do that. Rosemary, could you tell the Octocadets a little about what that dish does?
Sure. My name is Lieutenant Rosemary Abbott. I'm the operations officer aboard the Okeanos Explorer, and that is our VSAT. It stands for Very Small Aperture Terminal, and inside that satellite dome is a very powerful dish antenna that allows us to communicate with shore and share video in real time. The technology is called telepresence.
Wow, that is so interesting. Thank you, Rosemary. Now I'm getting really hungry. Let's go to the kitchen and talk about food. This is the ship's kitchen, also known as the galley. And this is Michael. Hi, on this ship, and he keeps 49 people fed for 3 weeks at a time. Michael, how do you do that?
With a lot of care and with the help of 3 crew members. I have myself, the chief steward, a chief cook, and a second cook. And we just do it with a lot of love and care and make sure that everybody's happy and well fed. We use up to 150 dozen eggs per trip, up to 100 gallons of milk, a lot of veggies and fruits, a lot of snacks. Everybody's very pleased with what we usually put out. We also make sure that we do it in a loving way, in a sanitary way, in a safe way that keeps everybody from getting any tummy aches.
I'm about to enter the ship's bridge. It's like the Octopod's headquarters.
Octonauts to the HQ.
Ahoy, Captain.
Ahoy, Debbie.
Hi, Eric.
Hello.
Octocadets, meet Eric Johnson, the commander of the ship. Eric, can you tell us about what you do up here?
Absolutely. Hello, Octocadets. My name's Eric Johnson. I'm an Corps officer, and I'm the captain of the Okeanos Explorer. Welcome to my office. This is where we drive the ship. This is where we control the operations. We run the propellers that are underneath us in the back to the wheel up here at the front, which is where we steer. It's a pretty cool job. It's very exciting, and it's pretty beautiful around here as well.
So, Octocadets, now you know a little bit about the ship and how we explore the deep sea. I hope you enjoyed our time together. I'll see you next time.
Debbie, safety first.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back for the marine section of the forecast. We'll start off with a look at our sea ice edge. We did talk about earlier some of the stronger winds coming off of the state out of that easterly direction. This is going to help to push and grow the main ice pack out on the westerly portions of that as it pushes out farther to the east over the next couple days. However, by the end of the week, we do expect a change in the pattern that's going to bring up some stronger flow from the south, some warmer air with that. It's going to start to push back the ice farther to the north. Taking a look at the marine forecast down in southeast Alaska out over the Gulf waters, we have southerly winds 20 to 25 knots out east, 30 to 35 knots up north. And then in the inside waters, we do have a southeast to southerly wind direction, 20 to 25 knots, seas up to as high as 10 feet in the southern locations. Then on Wednesday, southeast winds 25 to 30 knots in the inside waters, still higher seas up to 10 feet in the southern locations. And then out over the Gulf, southerly winds 30 to 35 knots, down in the eastern locations, up north 25 to 30 knots expected. For south central Alaska, southeasterly winds 20 knots in the western portions of the Gulf. Northern portions, however, a little bit stronger, 30 to 35 knots expected. Prince William Sound 25 knots out of the east. And in Cook Inlet area, southerly winds 15 to 20 knots expected. Then on Wednesday, Gulf waters picking up to be out of the south 30 to 35 knots. In Prince William Sound, southeasterly winds 25 knots expected. Northern portions of Cook Inlet out of a southerly direction around 15 knots, and then picking up quite a bit in the south out of a southerly direction as well, 30 knots there, extending to the west of the Barren Islands. For the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, around Kodiak Island, southeast winds 15 to 20 knots expected. And then for the Alaska Peninsula on the Bering side, we have easterly winds 15 to 20 knots, and then south to east winds 20 to 25 knots on the Pacific side. For Wednesday, around Kodiak Island, southwesterly winds 25 knots there, southwesterly on the Pacific side of the peninsula down to 20 knots, and then a little bit weaker on the Bering side of the peninsula, 15 to 20 knots out of that easterly direction. Taking a look at the Aleutian Islands on Tuesday, starting off by the eastern Aleutians, our low pressure is out over the area, so direction is a little bit variable, but wind speeds will be around 15 knots. For the central Aleutians, picking up to 30 to 35 knots, and then out by the western Aleutian Islands, northwesterly flow of 25 to 35 knots expected. On Tuesday, Tuesday, on Wednesday rather, things are gonna pick up quite a bit for the western Aleutians. Southerly winds up to as high as 50 knots expected and 20-foot seas. And as we move out by the central Aleutian Islands, dropping down to 40 knots out of the south. And by the time we get to the eastern Aleutian Islands, down to 35 knots out of a westerly direction. Along the west coast of the state, we are going to see some weaker winds up in Prince William's or in Norton Sound, 25 knots out of the north, 25 to 30 knots down much of the west coast into Nunavik Island area, and then 30 knots out of a northeasterly direction for St. Matthew Island and the Pribilof Islands on Tuesday. Then on Wednesday, we are going to see northerly winds continuing along the west coast, weakest in Norton Sound, again 15 knots there, 20 to 25 knots along the rest of the west coast, and then 30 knots for St. Matthew Island and the Pribilof Islands. For the northern locations, northwest coastline, we're going to see northerly winds 25 to 30 knots, and then up along the north slope area, we're going to see northeasterly winds 15 to 20 knots up there. On Wednesday, 15 to 20 knots continuing out of that northeasterly direction, and then down the west coast of the state, northeast winds 35 to 45 knots, strongest along the capes by Cape Lisburn and Point Hope, and then dropping down 25 knots south of the Bering Strait. For a recap of tonight's weather, we have low pressure out by the eastern Aleutians, bringing some snow out through much of the Bering Sea, including the Pribilof Islands, and a mix of rain and snow for much of the Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. Out over mainland Alaska, we're going to see quite a bit of snow from southwest Alaska through south central into the interior and up along the Arctic coastline. We do have winter weather advisories out in the interior for snow and also down by the Susitna Valley. Please check the website weather.gov/Alaska for specific details for your area. Along the west coast, we have other winter weather advisories. These ones are for wind chills and blowing snow, some of the stronger winds along the coastline. Out over the Gulf waters, southerly winds going to bring some rain to near the coast and into the Panhandle, with snow as we get farther to the north. As we move into Tuesday, going to continue to see southerly flow through the Gulf, bringing more rain to the Panhandle, snow farther to the north once again, snow throughout much of the southern portion of the mainland, through the interior and up along the Arctic coast, continuing to see some blowing snow conditions along the west coast. Then with our low by the eastern Aleutian Islands, we're going to see continued snow throughout the Bering Sea, including the Pribilof Islands, down by the western Aleutians, but central Aleutians through the Alaska Peninsula, expecting to see a mixture of rain and snow. With Alaska Weather, I'm David Kramer.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.